I never thought anything strange could come from this day. On a rather sunny day, I filled up the trash bin next to my street with the garbage that had been filling up my home. I knew that the dumpster truck would be around soon to empty it, as it had been that way every day. Seeing as I had nothing else to do for the morning, I decided it would be the proper time to go for a quick 5-minute jog to the next block downtown. In fact, the temperature was in the perfect spot so that I couldn't get really too hot until the end of my jog. As I was walking back to my home as part of the cool down, I was shocked at what I had found. The trash in my bin had not been picked up, but rather was strewn around all around the bin. Barks root beer cans littered around the bin in a circle along with various other bits of debris. The black trash bag that I had placed the unwanted material into appeared to be emptied completely and was just laying on top of the bin. Wondering what could have happened, I began to clean up the unexpected mess. However, as I was about to pick up one of the bark cans into the bag, it seems that the sack wasn't completely empty. I curiously peered into it to find an old SNES cartridge. I didn't remember throwing out something like that recently. In fact, every SNES game that I had ever bought before is still in my basement. I figured maybe, whatever, someone littered my trash everywhere, probably put that in there. So I took the game out and examined it. What was on it surprised me. I know that there are a lot of stories about games that have the label torn off or a suspicious looking cartridge to begin with. However, this label actually seemed professional in its making. The only thing off about it was the premise of the game as it showed by the label. The title of the game was simply My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, similar to how the title was just by the show's name or on the ISO game. The Generation 4 character models were even present on the cartridge as well. Twilight Sparkle, Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, and all the other main characters were present. This was especially odd since the old version of the show came out in 2010, which is way after the time anyone making SNES games came out with a profit. I think I brought it back to a particular game known as Battle Kit for the original NES. Someone had actually programmed that for an old system long after it was abandoned by most developers. In fact, the guy even seemed to be selling a physical copy of it to people to make a small profit. After hearing this, I figured maybe it was just some fan developer who wanted to share his or her creation with someone else. I was rather curious as to why this had been done in such a messy manner though. They could have just left the game on my doorstep and I would have gladly sat down to play it. As I was beginning to walk back to my home, I noticed the back of the cartridge didn't feel as smooth as it should have. My fingers had slid across a rough patch somewhere. I flipped the supposed game over as I noticed that one piece of tape on the back. In black marker and almost seeming as if it was in Times New Roman font, it read, "I'm sharing the magic. TS." TS? Were those the same initials as those of Tara Strong, the voice actor who was of Twilight Sparkle within the game that this is based on? I thought it was cool, and whoever made this also had gotten the approval of one awesome voice actress as well. I remember saying somewhere once before that I described whatever Tara Strong touches turns to gold. Seeing as I have yet to see anything terribly bad come out of wherever she's a part of, I thought the saying would have had some merit in determining how good this game was really going to be. I think I rambled on enough about how I managed to come across the game. I think it's time to describe what came from playing it. When I first booted it up, I was surprised to see that the 16-bit sprites within the game actually closely resembled what the main 6 ponies in the show looked like. They were sitting in front of what was Fluttershy's home in the show. They seemed to be relaxing with a nice little picnic. Twilight was reading another book, as usual. Fluttershy seemed to be resting across with their pet bunny, Angel, resting next to her. Dash could be seen just lying down on her back with some sunglasses on. Pinkie Pie seemed to be focused on waiting for someone to come out from underneath the picnic rag or something. I don't even know. She's hard to figure out in the show too. Rarity and Applejack just had their backs against a tree, all of which was covered with a classic logo which read, My Little Pony. Most impressive yet was the audio. It was a classic remix of Pinkie Pie's Smile song from the show, which is one of my favorites of all time. It always seemed to cheer me up in the worst of days. Hearing it through the SNES sound chip was just amazing. I knew this game actually had some effort put into it. After I was getting over the beauty of the smile track, I pressed start to start the game. The first few screens explained the basic controls that I'd have to use to get past certain levels. If anything, this gameplay was similar to what Tyrian had to offer you when you have to use all your character to get past certain obstacles. For example, Rainbow Dash would necessarily remove thunderclouds and fly over things, while Fluttershy could be used to tame and walk past any large living creatures that you happen to run past. Of course, for the inanimate obstacles along with several other threads, Twilight would always use her magic. Pinkie Pie was able to launch a party cannon attack when somehow managed to turn enemies and projectiles into some sort of cake batter. Applejack's main purpose was bucking all the apples out of a tree for more food in the event that your party's health got too low. Apple trees were very rare in this game though, and would only provide a maximum of 3 apples when bucked. Rarity was simply used for the majority of the stealthy proportions of the game, in which you had to get past a guard or avoid being detected, as you would have to use one of several of her outfits to blend in with your surroundings. Now that I've gotten that lengthy description out of the way, the game played out just how it usually did. It was time to actually describe the truly frightening experience of this experience. After playing through the majority of the levels for about an hour, I came across a level simply titled Stage 16, Stop. I thought it was odd. The way Stop was written was also unnerving, as it almost seemed like small drips of blood were dripping from each of the red letters. As the level faded into view, I was horrified by what I had seen. Dead, lifeless trees that seemed more like a Nintendo 64 graphic were appearing on the screen. The sky was also blackened with a slight hint of red. The ground that I'd been walking on was gray instead of the lively colors that I had seen before. The character who was also on the screen was Fluttershy, who seemed more worried than usual. The freakiest part of all this that was playing the Smile song in reverse. This version wasn't even the 16-bit version from the title screen. It sounded like an actual instrumental of the song, just played in reverse. I was beyond words at this point. Whoever made this game was a sick, twisted individual. Confused why there was a sudden change in atmosphere, I decided to move forward, only to see a giant, bony black hand come out of the ground and grab Fluttershy. She was crushed within that same instant, blood running out of every direction. The game had never been this graphic with a character death before. In fact, there was never any blood in the event of a character had temporarily fainted. Deciding to try a different approach to overcoming the obstacle of the hand, I thought I could use Rainbow Dash to fly over it. However, to my horror, the hand reached all the way up to the blackened sky and still crushed the poor Dash with that same grip that had gotten the best of me before. Maybe Pinkie Pie would help me accomplish something with an insane stroke of luck, perhaps? Nope. She was crushed into a giant pool of blood as well. I tried switching to Twilight to see if I could use her magic to get across, but the game was bugged and wouldn't let me at this point. I thought maybe I could use Rarity to get across with a camouflage disguise of sorts. No such luck. The camouflage was soon bloodstained. I tried switching to Twilight again, but she still wasn't selectable. Applejack was my last hope. Of course, she was crushed as easily as everyone else who would bite into a single apple. I'd given up all hope in beating this game when this game suddenly put Twilight into control. In fact, I was no longer pressing any buttons. Twilight was just casually strolling past a spot where other 5 members of my party were brutally crushed as if they were toothpicks. After she reached the edge of the screen, a dialogue box appeared. Princess Celestia was right. Friends really do come in handy when you need them. After I pressed A to remove the dialogue, the reverse smile song stopped. It was dead silent for about 10 or more seconds. Then another dialogue box appeared. Their potential was exceedingly great. It even felt good just to process it for myself. I feel as if I had accomplished everything now. What kind of sick madness was this? This wasn't the Twilight I knew from the show. She would have never harmed her friends just for her own personal gain, would she? And Twilight turned directly towards me. I could see a red pixelated growing in her eyes, and she just stared at me intently. I'm not only merely doing what you've been doing this entire time, I'm using my friends as a means of escaping my current life. You've grown bored with your own life in the same way I have mine. It's time to move on. Using them? How's anything she's done ever remotely comparable to my feelings? Almost as if to respond to my question, she answered, Your own life is empty, as was mine. You turned elsewhere to keep yourself entertained. You needed a purpose. I found mine, but it seems that you still need to find yours. At this point, a very disturbing image of Twilight with an unsettling smile, just like the one seen in the episode titled Lesson Zero. That smile sent a shiver down my spine when I saw it in the show, but this far tops what that detailed. Everything about it seemed like a real-life photograph that had been snapped with a high-quality camera. Her eyes were completely missing. Beyond each were sockets were black voids. The mouth was also toothless. There was no tongue or any other features within it either. There were just black voids as the eyes were. At this point, text just splattered across the screen, almost as if each letter was carved with a bloody knife. The text read, "I'm sharing the magic." At this point, a loud, ear-piercing scream suddenly came out of my speakers. I covered my ears in a vain attempt to block out the sound, but it was still coming through. I fumbled with the power button on the SNES for a few seconds, and the sound finally stopped as the game was shut off. I ejected the game cartridge and left it sitting on my kitchen table. I knew I had to share this experience with everyone, and I needed all the proof I can get to show everyone my case was real. However, I felt really tired despite it only being 1 in the afternoon, so I figured a quick nap wouldn't hurt me. However, during this quick nap, I happened to have a strange dream. I felt like I was walking down a street in my original hometown in Bayville, Connecticut. I was just casually walking down the street when I stopped in front of someone's trash bin. I madly ravaged through the person's trash receptacle for whatever strange reason, littering all kinds of trash here and there. I also happened to take something out of a bag that I had somehow been carrying, thinking that someone was the cursed cartridge I had managed to come across earlier. So far, the front label looked normal, but then it mutated to the shape of a frightening image of Twilight that I described earlier. I looked at it for a few more seconds. I dropped the cartridge into the trash and ran away from that residence as fast as I could. When I woke up from this dream, I was relieved that I was still in my home. However, the oddest part was that, looking at my kitchen table, I noticed that the game was gone. I could have sworn that I put that game on the table. As I was madly searching around my house for the game, I got frustrated and knew it was futile to try searching for the game when I was just getting more and more stressed out with every minute, so I decided to take a break and check my emails. My mother had sent me an entire email detailing a strange incident that happened to her home that morning. Someone had gone and messed with her trash, just like what had done to me earlier. She made no mention of a game though. However, I knew she probably thought the game was just more garbage and she wasn't interested in gaming to begin with. I didn't bother asking her about it, and it seemed like a weird question coming straight out of the left field at the time. Plus, there was that dream that actually came true. I don't know where the game is right now. Maybe it finally got hauled off somewhere where it belongs. Maybe my mother got a crazy idea to actually play it, and now she has to suffer the same torment that I did while involuntarily passing it on to someone else. Whatever it is, be careful where you're playing it. If that Twilight has enough power to control people's actions in the real world, then who knows what she's capable of doing next.